Okay, welcome back to our tutorial series where we're building a VR application. I want to give you a quick method for adding some visual and auditory feedback to your game objects so that when you are trying to interact with them, that you're able to give your user a better sense of which objects in your scene are interactive. So to do this, we're going to actually use a prefab from our XR toolkit called the Interaction Affordance. So let's go ahead and let's pick one of our cubes here. So we've got this instantaneous cube, and what I want to do with that is I'm going to drag this interaction affordance onto the cube. And when you expand that, you see that I actually have something on here called the color affordance. And what we're going to do with this color affordance is we're going to tell the system how we want the cube to change colors when we interact with it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag this interaction affordance onto our, we're going to drag our cube onto the interactable source because it is the thing that is telling our system what is happening. So this is the source of the interaction. So whatever the state of the cube is, selected, focused, hovered, whatever, it's going to come tell this system how to behave. We want to ignore focus events, and we'll see why here in a second. And then we're going to come over to our color affordance, and the next thing we need to do is we need to pass our cube again, this time to our renderer, because our renderer is what tells the cube what color to be. So we're going to pass the cube to our renderer. And then you can see in here that it's already got something set up for us. It's got the interaction affordance, this object here, set up right in here. So let's say you were creating one of these from scratch. You're going to need to provide the affordance state provider. And we'll see how to do that here coming up. And then we also have this interaction affordance color theme. And so if we double click on that, we'll find that there's actually a folder in our XR toolkit where we have this interaction color affordance theme. Now yours will look different from mine because I've already modified mine. And you can see that there's a bunch of different states in here. So we've got disabled, idle, hovered, hover priority, selected, activated, and focused. So we're really only going to focus on two of these. We're going to focus on the hovered state and the selected state because essentially everything else that's going on in here is being ignored. So come over to your hovered state. You'll click on the color, pick a color that you want to use. I like this kind of magenta, pinkish, purplish color just because it really stands out. So I'm going to use that for my, my hover state. And then I would come over to my selected state and I pick this like really, really, really bright green color. I thought that would be really useful. And so that's set up our interaction color affordance. Now this is already set up, basically by, just like dragging it over here, right? So that's great. If we made a different one, let's say, so like I could, duplicate this by hitting Control D, and I could just add, let's just add a 2 in front of it just so that it stands out a bit. Maybe I want to make this a different color. So maybe I want to go with kind of more of a burnt orange color. And there we go. And maybe I wanted to use that instead. So I'm going to go ahead and swap that out just so you can kind of see how these themes work. So you can kind of swap them in and out if you want to try different ones by just creating new ones and adding them in. All right, so let's go ahead and hit play and sort of see what we get here. Original orange is because we have this replace idle state value with initial value. What this does is it asks the system, hey, what color was the object originally? Because I'm going to want to turn it back to that color once the individual is done interacting with it. So that's the first key thing we want to do on color. And that will work for pretty much most objects. We'll try and do that really quickly here on this fire extinguisher object that I added to my scene. So it's not going to work quite as well on this object because this object has a pretty detailed mesh on it. But we can go ahead and give it a whirl, and we'll just show you kind of how that kind of works. So again, I'm going to drag the interaction affordance on there. The interaction affordance is looking for an interaction. So I'm going to drag my fire extinguisher in there. So it's getting the XR grab interactable from that. I'm going to ignore the focused events. And then on the color, instead of that orange and green effect, I'm going to go with that kind of purple and green effect. So I'm going to come back to my affordance themes here, and I think it's this one right here, this interaction color affordance. I'm going to drag that on there. I'm going to drag my fire extinguisher onto the renderer. And now what should happen is my fire extinguisher should turn kind of a purplish color and then green color when I'm grabbing it. Setup. Now let's look at how we can apply sound as an affordance to the system. So again, I'll come back over to my interaction affordance. I'm going to right click on this, hit create empty game object, audio affordance. And this is what we're going to create from scratch. Now we want to type in add component, audio affordance receiver. Cool. And again, we get a provided a state provider, so that's our interaction affordance. And then it's looking for an audio affordance theme. Now I have already created an audio affordance theme right here, and that affordance theme already has some sound effects in it. So if you don't have any sound effects, you can come over to stuff like Envanto Elements. That's something I pay for so that I have sound effects available. Or you can just look for sound effects for free online. I think the Kini Assets had some sound effects as well. Download some of those. Or if you want to search on this site and let me know, I can download some things for you and share them with you as well. But I went ahead and already downloaded those, and I created a little folder in my assets called audio. And you can see I have sort of a bell ding and then like a little sparkly kind of noise. And what I'm using those for is to sort of indicate two things. One, I'm using the bell for when my cursor hits an object, so it kind of dings when the object is something that's grabbable. And then after I grab it, it makes sort of like a success sort of sparkly kind of noise. And I will show you what that kind of sounds like here in just a second. So let's come back over to our audio affordance, and we're going to drag this audio affordance theme onto our theme here. And when we go and add that on, now when we play the audio, we should not only see a color change, but also hear some sort of auditory feedback. All right. And again, I can do the same thing for the fire extinguisher. So let's try that really quickly just to kind of show you again. I can do this to basically any object I want. So I can create an audio affordance, add the audio affordance receiver. I drag its interaction audio affordance on there. And then I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to hit Control D or Command D if you're using Mac on the audio affordance here. And this is our second one. So let's put a 2 in front of this as well, just to make it pretty clear that that's the second one. And I'm going to replace the bell ding and the diamond sparkle with some different audio. I'd rather use I've got this really cool metal kind of canister sound I'm going to add. And then I also downloaded a sort of fire extinguisher noise that I'll use for when I grab it. So that's all set up there. And again, you want to make sure that all of your other states are set to none. Otherwise, you might get some sort of random noises happening throughout your interaction. Come back over to our audio affordance. Come into our samples here, affordance themes. That's where I've got that stored. And then I'm going to grab this audio affordance, drag it on there. And now when I hit play, I should get a sort of metal canister noise. Fire So now I've got some audio feedback. Now, one last type of feedback that we can add to the system to really kind of emphasize that things are happening, and just gives you again just some variety in terms of the feedback. You may not use all of these at the same time. You may choose to use one or another. So let's come into our interaction affordance, hit create empty game object, and this time what we're going to do is we're going to scale the object. So this is another thing that you see in a lot of video games, is the idea of like when you hover over something that's interactable, it kind of scales up in size ever so slightly, just to kind of give you a sense of like, hey, reach out and grab me. So we can do that by adding, instead of an audio affordance receiver, a vector 3 affordance receiver. And again, what a vector 3 affordance receiver does is it passes an XYZ value to the system and tells it what those values are. I'm going to drag the interaction affordance of the cube onto here. And then I need to come and either, I can't remember if this was in there. If not, you can right click in your affordance folder and hit create affordance theme, vector 3 affordance theme. Again, I'll show you how to do that. Once you're in the folder where you want it stored, right click, create affordance theme, vector 3 affordance. And we'll make two of these. We're going to make one for the fire extinguisher. We'll make that one number 2. And we'll make one for the cube. And this is a really important step here. So when you're creating these affordance themes, these vector 3 affordances in particular, we need to double check the actual size of our object. So the cube is 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. And I think this is always default to 1 or 0. 0. All right, so this will, when you first create one of these, it'll be set to 0. What we want to do is we want to set all of these values: disabled, idle, hovered, hover priority, selected, activated, focused. We want to set all of them to the same size as your cube. So this is a little tedious. You're going to have to go through and do this like one at a time. You want to make sure all of these are set to 0.1. And then on the hovered state, you want to set it to something just slightly bigger than your current state. So I set mine to 0.15. So what this is going to do, this is going to scale up our cube by just a tiny amount, but you'll see in the interaction that that makes it kind of a really cool effect with the color change and the audio. Um, and then what's also cool is by setting all of these other values back to the exact same size of the cube, once you let go of the cube, after picking it up, it'll go back to its original size. So let's go ahead and add the same thing on the, well, let's finish building this out. So let's go ahead and drag that vector affordance theme on there. That's our first one that sets it to 0.1 and 0.15. And then let's create one for our fire extinguisher. So on the interaction affordance, again, we're going to hit interaction affordance, create empty, scale affordance, add component, vector affordance receiver. Drag the interaction affordance on there. Come over here. Let's populate our affordance theme, and it turns out our fire extinguisher is a scale of 1, so this is going to be a relatively easy one to do. So I come over here, 1, 1, 1, 1. So again, I'm going to do this for all of the different states. And honestly, it's probably just easier to go through and just fill all of these out with the exact scale the first time. Not sure if there's an easier way to do this, but this is the way I do it. And then on the hovered, I'm going to set this to 1.1. So nothing too crazy, just a little bit bigger. All right, cool. So, and then remember to drag that vector affordance theme onto our affordance receiver. Now there's one last step we need to do because this is only part of the process. We actually need to tell it what we want that vector 3 to do. And to do that, we're going to hit this plus button over here, and we're going to add this value updated because we need to tell this system what kind of vector 3 effect we want, because there's actually more than one. So we can come over and we're going to add a transform. And what we're going to do is local scale. Now, in theory, you could pick from any number of these dynamic options. You could rotate the object. You could change its position. You could do a bunch of different things. But for our case, we're going to change the local scale. You can see that makes a little subtle difference there. We need to do the same thing on the fire extinguisher. Again, you're going to grab the object, not the interaction affordance. You're going to grab the whole object, drag it in there, transform, local scale. All right, so if I did that correctly, what I should now see is the cube kind of increase in size and the fire extinguisher increase in size on hover. And then when I grab it, it should change color and make a noise. And then when I let go of it, they should all go back to their original size and color. All right, cool. So now you can ding, color change and size increase, grab it, audio cue, color change, let it go. Fire extinguisher. Hover over it, get a sound effect, grows in size, perfect. Fire extinguisher, let it go, back to. All right, so a couple don't necessarily want to use all three of these at the same time. That's not necessarily beneficial. You really need to think about which one of these things is the most appropriate. Now, color is always a great choice. It's probably like the most obvious to users that something is interactive or that they should reach out and do something with it. So it's probably a safe bet to use the color affordance. One thing to keep in mind is that on like our demo cubes, for example, we already did a color change. So if you don't remove these colors, for example, on the kinematic cube and the velocity tracking cube, I think they go from blue to red and then blue to green. We need to remove these in order for the affordance theme to work. So you can see that I already have them removed on the instantaneous cube. So make sure to keep that in mind. Any objects you imported probably won't have that problem. Instead, you'll have the problem that I have with my fire extinguisher, where the color may not be immediately apparent. So if you don't have any sort of like lighter colors or colors that are like basically not black in your object, the color effect may not work quite as well. So you'll have to play around with that. But in general, color, great choice. Scale, also a pretty good choice, but can come with some drawbacks. So for example, let's say I were to put the orange cube really, really close to, let's put it like right in between these two other cubes. And then, let's say I did something really crazy where, I don't know, I'll set this to like something really ridiculous, like 1, right? And we'll see what happens here. So the problem with scale is it's scaling up the whole object, including its collider. So if you go to interact with this, you could see, oops, it just knocked all the other stuff off of my conveyor system here. So scale can be kind of a tricky one if you don't get that perfectly right. So my suggestion would be only use scale if you know that the objects you're dealing with have enough separation that they're not going to collide with each other when you go to use that effect. Same thing with like if you're grabbing something and you need to place it, carefully into another object or near another object. you don't want that scale to throw off your ability to sort of judge whether or not you're putting that object in the right place. The other time that that may come into effect and be kind of annoying is if for some reason that maybe you're using a socket and it doesn't recognize the object because it's not matched scale-wise. So be careful with how you use that. It's great, again, for situations where maybe you're first interacting with something and you need the user to understand that, or where the object is not going to come into contact with or interact with other things. So scale can be a good choice. Now, the one that's probably the most tricky is the audio affordance. The audio affordance is great because it's a very salient cue about what to do. The downside to it is can get a really kind of annoying. You could imagine that if you had a lot of objects all with that same sort of ringing like bell noise, that as you move through the environment or as you sort of pointed at things, you might get a lot of ding, 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 ding kind of noises. That might not be what you want. You may just want to use the noise once. So like maybe the very first time they hover over something and grab it, but after that you want it to go away. A quick tip on how you can manage that is through actually the instantaneous cube or the object you have it attached to. So if you come over to the XR Grab Interactable, you have these interactable events. We can actually use this event system to turn off that effect. So what you could see here is I already kind of started this, but I'll do it again here. If I come over to select exited, and be careful, like there's also a last select exited. What we really want is just the select exited. Hit the plus sign, and then what we're going to do is we're going to drag the audio affordance into that field from the cube, right? So I'm going to grab the audio affordance of the cube, drag that in. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set the game object to set active. Now, when you say game object set active, that's telling it whether or not this thing is true or false. If it's not checked, it's false. If it's checked, it's true. And that's no different than when we, come up here to this little check mark up here. This is the same thing as set active. So if I turn it off, the cube is invisible. If I turn it back on, the cube's back. So what we just told the system is, hey, after you grab the object for the first time, go ahead and turn the audio off. I don't want to hear it again. Because again, that'll help us, keep the system from being annoying. So up to you if you want to do that. Maybe you want the sound effect to work every single time. That's fine too. But be conscious about the design decision you're making with that. So let's go ahead and test that out and see how that works. All right, so we're back in here. As you can see, I can hover over it, makes the little ringing noise. That's great. Now I'm going to grab it. It does its little chime to let me know that I've successfully grabbed it. I let it go. Now, when I go to hover back over it, you can see that audio effect is no longer happening. So the event turned that off. And again, that's just like a little thing you can do to try and make it a little less annoying. You can kind of already tell, like I could inadvertently be touching this over and over and over again in my scene. And after a while, that banging noise could get really distracting or annoying. So again, think about how you want to use that audio and use it sparingly. All right, so that's all we have for the affordances. And hopefully you find that useful. I'm sure there's a variety of different things you can use this for. So that'll be something that you can use to kind of enhance your experience and help a user to kind of understand what is or isn't interactive while they're exploring the scene. So we'll look at some additional ways to do this using some of the UI capabilities, and maybe you can combine all of them, the color, the audio, the scale, and maybe some text prompts or other visualizations to help guide your users through your experience. All right, with that, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.